Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the monthly XR News Medical and Health Edition for educators in VR. This is an immersive fireside chat where we connect with innovators and explorers their personal journey into XR AI. Together, let's have a conversation to see what sparks and thrives, and have a conversation about the passion and how they're using immersive technology to make a real difference in the world of health and wellness. I'm your host, Rachel Darden, a health and well-being coach and educator. I'm proudly part of the weekly XR News series, and it's hosted here and engaged every week. Join me every first Wednesday of the month. We'll talk about how taking a closer look at how extended reality is shaping the future of well-being, healthcare, and human connection. Every third Wednesday, we have the RX News Innovation Spotlight with hosts Maxwell McGee, Chris Matson, and Tom Furness. They're always showing us the latest and greatest things to do here and engage and other XR opportunities. The XR News is anchored in every second and fourth week, bringing you the latest news from across the metaverse with our friends Laurel, Steph, and Karen. The bonus is all the links to the news stories covered are posted on our Educators in VR Discord. All of our shows are must-see and available for you on replay on the Educators of VR YouTube channel, so make sure you check us out over there. We're also available in LinkedIn, Facebook, Blue Sky, of course our Discord, and the educatorsinvr.com website. The XR News is produced by Educators in VR and run by volunteers. We're grateful for all of our partners, supporters who keep us going, including the Reinhardt Foundation, Girls Team Institute, Engage Themselves, the iLearns Virtual World Society, the Universe Cadets, and Vertex Forum 3D, and always the Bridge Makers. And if you would like to support us, please reach out to us at educators.nvr.com. If you or your company would like to sponsor us, that's where you would find that information. So today, we're welcoming our guest, Dan Blair. We hear a lot about how XR and AI as emerging tools, but today we're really all about moving beyond the buzzwords into what's actually working, especially here in healthcare and high-stake environments where learning directly affects all outcomes. Joining us today is a friend to us at Educators in VR, Dan Blair. He's the founder and the CEO of BitSpace Development. Dan is an applied XR researcher, educator, and a digital world builder who has spent over a decade designing immersive systems that don't just simulate reality, but actually enhance how people learn, train, and perform in all reality and extended reality. So today, let's explore how XR and AI are being used in healthcare scenarios and where this is all heading in the near future. Dan, thank you so much for being with us here today.
No, thank you.
All right. So Dan, you spent over a decade building immersive environments through different, platforms. What first pulled you into XR, and when did you start seeing real potential for healthcare?
That's a great question. I also constantly forget how the clapping sounds in Engage. It's funny how like we can have a completely silent space, and then every so often you just have like one clap. So yeah, I got started in the VR space basically. Well, I guess it was like 12 years ago now, or 13 years ago now. I was handed my DK1 way back when it was still on Kickstarter, and I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. I'm gonna keep my eye on this. And one day I was handed a DK2, and I could lean forward, and I was playing and I've told this story I think on the show once before, but I was playing a game called Cafe MA, and I can't remember the developer on it, but basically you are a robot sitting in a rainy cafe. And there really isn't much to it. Like, it's a very simple tech demo. But what blew me away was with the DK2 had added this revolutionary thought that if I move my head in 3D space, I shouldn't be stuck to 3 degrees of freedom. Obviously,
Right.
we reintroduced that later with the Oculus Go, before the Quest came out. But when the DK2 came out, there was nothing aside from some very hacky solutions by connecting different tech together. There was nothing that allowed you to kind of like peer around a corner in VR. And the DK2 added the first base station, and it allowed us to like add some level of 6 degrees of freedom on, of course, just your head. We didn't have controllers yet. And when I leaned forward in Cafe MA, I was amazed by the fact that I had such a strong sense of presence with the robot. And I promise you, I'm not a robot in real life, although I probably could feel like one sometimes. But I identified with that reflection of a robot in the window so much that I quit my job and started my studio like almost immediately after. And of course, took it into maybe less exciting pathways or more exciting, depending on what you're into. But it was that like single moment of presence that made me think like, I can extend anything and I can make you feel or make you experience anything that I want. And that started making me think about like, how do we learn and how do we create those scenarios? The second part of your question is the very first thing that someone asked me to work on the DK2 was a visualization of a red blood cell. And so all the way back to the DK1 and the DK2, all of our use cases, and it's that we still use these lines today, but all of our use cases were, we can send you somewhere that you can't experience any other way. And VR, it literally allows us to be that magic school bus. You know, we can go on that field trip with our teacher and we can go and see what it's like to live inside of a bloodstream, or go and see how something is built. And so back in 2016, I did a TEDx talk called Reforging Reality. And I usually tell people not to go watch it because I'm a much better public speaker today than I was back then. But I was right about almost everything. I talk about like presence and I make predictions and stuff along those lines. And I'm not usually one to go and pump my previous talks, but I was right on a lot of those things. But essentially, at the end of the day, what I was trying to do was convey that by putting a screen too close to our eyes, we can learn differently, and we can apply that into high risk scenarios. And that's ultimately what led to some of my like more exciting projects in the healthcare space. But it was the very first thing I was ever really asked to do. It was before I even got paid to do things. So it was just, Dan, I'm a researcher at the university and we just need to see a red blood cell. And at that time, this was at a stage in the VR industry where you made a cube spin and suddenly you're flying down to Valve headquarters to go and learn about the HTC Vive, or you're in tight with the Meta reality teams, which weren't even called Meta yet. It was still Facebook. They hadn't even acquired Oculus at the time. So you're in tight with those teams just because you're doing something that is, even today, you can just ask Claude, make me a spinning cube. Like it's not, there's no the bar to entry, the bar to being impressed is significantly higher today than it once was, is what I'm saying. I'm a hack now.
You're far from a hack, but I get what you're saying, how it feels. So with that shift from curiosity to real world application, that's really interesting to me. So let's stay here for just a minute. We often hear about simulation, but not always about the outcomes. Where are you seeing XR actually translating into real-world readiness in healthcare today specifically?
I think like the coolest application that I've used for healthcare, well, again, there's kind of two. There's two practical applications right now. And one of them is actually in the screen behind us. Actually, I'm going to turn around. Yes, it is actually behind us. So I've got a monitor in front of me. I can see what we're seeing. Great. That skeleton on the, is it the left for everyone? Yes, on the left. That's a skeleton from an experience that we just launched for WISE Kinetic Energy, which is Women in Science and Engineering. And they're a group that's out of the University of Manitoba, which is the province that I'm located in. And what they do is they expose youth into STEAM or STEM. I'm pushing A, but they're pushing into STEM. And so they're focused on like engineering and healthcare applications, stuff like that, getting girls to explore different career paths, specifically trades and healthcare and stuff like that. And what they're doing right now is we're using AR specifically, so augmented reality, through the Tilt 5 glasses. And I'm just curious because I got a bit of a crowd here. Has anyone here used the Tilt 5 before? Please, not all at once. A lot of no's. The Tilt 5 is super fun. So the Tilt 5 is made by a person named Jerry. She used to be at Valve back in the day. And she created augmented reality glasses. And so I recommend, and I think most of the people attending are on computers, so I suspect they can have another tab open. I would recommend that you go and take a look at their website, because what it is it's essentially glasses that connect to your PC via USB-C cable. And you have a controller that looks like a barbecue lighter. And what we created was an experience called Bodybuilders. And Bodybuilders is basically a board game that allows youth to learn about the systems of the human body and then compete with each other to play essentially a game of operation to put the body back together. So it's less about like training a new surgeon and more about getting youth excited about and using it as a study aid for exploring an anatomical models of humans. But it creates that gamified element, right? So now you're learning by competing and learning by playing. Another really interesting example of applying healthcare application through augmented reality or virtual reality. And I'm going to dance around this topic a little bit because I've worked on projects in the sense of like they were on like the HoloLens, and some of them are funded by defense grants. So I can't necessarily talk about every aspect of it. But what I will say is scenario-based learning, and this won't be a surprise to anybody in the space here, scenario-based learning for field medic applications are super applicable to the use of AI and XR. And so one of my biggest projects that I was working on, I guess, most of the pandemic and then afterwards, because of its alignment with the HoloLens and some of the applications for HoloLens, was focused around creating a scenario engine that was used to train tactical combat casualty medicine and scenarios around that. Basically, what that means is working on mass casualty incident response. So, for example, there's been an IED blast, and you've got four wounded soldiers. You're the medic, and you've just showed up on scene. How do you triage that? So, using several different pieces of technology. So, what makes that work is the HoloLens itself for visualization, an iPad for instructors that allows the instructor to know what is each of the medics doing at any given time, but also to run a human physiology engine that was attached to each cadaver. That way, when I do things like apply a cricothyrotomy or apply medication, I can track that as part of the human physiology engine, and it'll give me realistic-ish vitals. And the reason I say realistic-ish is, of course, it's all simulated. It's not going to react the same as every human, but it's like approximately how a human would react to a medication or like some sort of procedure. So if you have a perfectly healthy human male and you apply a cricothyrotomy to them, it'll probably kill them. you got a big gash in your neck as long as you don't do the rest of the stuff. And so that particular application is interesting to talk about because it involved the 3D scanning of a huge amount of human cadavers to create a data set to be able to apply almost like a Snapchat filter using mechanism, showing mechanism of injury to cadavers. But it also monitored the activities and leveraged AI in the sense of one, decision support, but also are you doing the right procedure for the mechanism of injury that we're seeing, and then pairing that with the desired outcome of the actual project. So I think like some of the best applications for XR in healthcare right now are that on-the-job assisted medical decision support and the application of technology to get youth excited about exploring healthcare as an option for their own career. Super long-winded answer to your question.
No, but I just love it. It's so interesting to me. I especially love the medical side of it and how much it's helping people. Did anybody have any questions before we keep moving on? Just raise your hand If you just want to unmute yourself, there you go.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
Hey.
Yeah.
No, I just want to ask. You mentioned a magic school bus. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Oh, sure. That's a pop culture reference to a show that I watched when I was a kid. For those of you that don't know, the Magic School Bus is a cartoon with a teacher named Miss Frizzle that takes her class on wildly irresponsible field trips that I'm sure that none of their parents were aware of, which sometimes involved going to space, being shrunk into small versions of themselves. And at one point, they even go inside one of their classmates.
Wow.
So every single thing about that show seems like a logistical nightmare, but perfectly describes almost all of us explaining what we do in VR.
Thank you.
I gotcha. Any other questions?
All right, cool.
Great. I think one of the biggest challenges is working in on healthcare related XR projects, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that experiences this. Is probably out of all sectors, this has got to be the biggest for non-disclosure. like obviously you're dealing with a lot of sensitive data. So if you've put your application into production, you can't really talk too much about your tech stack and your user base, because if it's a defense funded project, or if it's a even this is true for any client project, but if it's owned IP by someone else, sometimes it can be challenging to share. But it also, I think, I'll go back, the last few conference talks I've given at AWE and VRTO and stuff have been kind of focused around what do you need to think about from a studio perspective on how do you operate in this space, right? So what kind of insurances do you need? What kind of certifications do you require, stuff like that, right? And so when you're working in the healthcare space, when you're dealing with client data, you need to consider one, the ethical application of your technology, but also are you dealing with patient data, and are you HIPAA compliant or PIPEDA compliant depending on where you're located, and stuff along those lines, which means that we almost never hear about full-scale deployments in the healthcare space because there's just so many hurdles to go through. I think the biggest difference between myself in the healthcare space and others is I'm not building a one-off app, right? There's a couple really exciting apps that have been coming out that allow you to explore genomes and explore cells and stuff like that. And that's a cool application for how you can bring healthcare related content into the classroom, but is very different than a workforce development module where you're training a nurse or training a surgeon. I think we saw a lot of cool examples of how that can happen during the pandemic, because there was so much funding around how to apply a vaccine, how to apply a mask, how to live in a pandemic world. Of course, all of that content feels extremely outdated today, but at the time there was a lot of funding around it, so we saw a lot more progress. I think that right now we're not seeing as much of that. And that's simply because of the nature of where a lot of funding is. The NIH hasn't been funding as much. There's clearly not the COVID response that there once was. And of course, there's a lot of shifts in the XR space. So I think we're seeing a bit of a lull at a high level in the XR space, but there's also a ton of opportunity.
No, and I agree with you. And a lot of opportunity in the medical and educational sectors, I believe. The social media side of it definitely got a big hit, but there's so many other things going on that is just not public yet. But I think in no time it will be. So when you're combining adaptive learning with this immersive environment, it starts to really shift how we think about education altogether, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I think about that. So you in the intro, you mentioned kind of the things I did, and I just started talking. But just for context, that everybody here, I run a couple different businesses, but I'm also an educator. So Bitspace Development is my core XR studio. It's been running for 12 years now. I also own a studio called Cura, or I guess a firm called Cura, which is an AI consultancy. I've been doing work in that space since 2017. I've published several papers that are healthcare related. They're actually related to the project I just mentioned, which is about synthetic data generation, medical decision support. but also human object detection and auto segmentation. That was so we could find the cadaver in 3D space and apply a mechanism of injury to the body, so we don't have to shoot a cadaver just to give it a bullet wound that you have to work on. But I think like one of the most relevant pieces on my end right now is the fact that I'm an applied XR researcher at a college called Red River College Polytechnic, which is a Canadian college, and a polytechnic is basically a degree granting college. It's a little different north of the border for those of you that are in the US, but very similar to like any other college you would expect. And within the mechanism here, I work both within the classroom, but also within research. And so I do applied research projects, and sometimes those are focused around drones, and sometimes they're focused around electric cars or whatever, but a lot of the time it's around simulation because that's my background. And I do a lot of interfacing with our nursing lab, and we've put in, although we're still waiting to hear on a lot of these things, but we've put in for several initiatives that are focused around expanding the functionality and the scope of what we want to do within the nursing sim labs. And I think like what some people like, or I guess like when we're thinking about the application of XR, we're thinking like, what am I going to build and sell on the Quest? But when we're thinking about extended reality and large scale deployments, often that's just like if it's the Quest or a Peak or whatever, that's just one piece of a larger deployment. And so we're usually looking at everything from the role players to the room you're in to the digital assets that are popping up, et cetera. So like a simulation might be there, you might be wearing a HoloLens, or you might be wearing like an X-Real or something or whatever, like any glasses. I like the Lenovo A3 lately. But like I got a digital layer, so I've got a digital twin of my physical space that I'm now popping up digital assets. But I might also have a mannequin that's acting as a patient, and that might be integrated into my scenario as well. And there might be a dashboard on the back end where the instructor is monitoring what is the student doing at any given time and is able to view that human physiology engine that represents the mannequin. And so like a successful deployment or a large scale like healthcare deployment is usually more than just what's running on a headset. It usually incorporates multifaceted inputs to create that almost like reality distortion field around what your game is. The way, and you started touching on that, like the way that we learn and how that changes, right? And so the reason I'm bringing this up is XR allows us to really focus in on that experiential learning component or reinforced learning. And I think AI also enhances that, right? So in the classroom now I'm applying my new knowledge, and at home I'm learning new things. I'm reading my books, I'm conversing with my AI agents, I'm absorbing new knowledge, whatever. And then when I come back to the classroom, I'm now in a lab and I'm applying that knowledge in a scenario that's made to represent physical reality. I find that it's become more and more important as an educator to upskill my thought process when it comes to social engineering, right? Because you need to be really convincing, but also to a degree is your improv skills. So like, which by the way, for everyone here, those are very important skills for sales as well. So if you're going to be a good salesperson, you should be good at social engineering and improv. But as a teacher, you kind of got to know that too, because you essentially have to lie to your students about what is reality in that moment and be really convincing about it so they buy into the game, which is the scenario. And then that helps reinforce all the learning. There's a researcher out of North Dakota that is worth following. His name is Dr. Richard Van Eck, and his PhD is in the gamification of cognition. And I first met him when I started BitSpace, and I was talking about the gamification of education. So thinking, and no surprise to anyone here, but thinking about the concept of micro-credentials, badging, stuff along those lines, and how do you like reinforce what you've learned in the scenario before we had, complex headsets. And so, yeah, I mean, like you're absolutely right. The way that we learn does change when it comes to VR, but it also should be changing across the board right now.
Right. We always say, I've been giving a lot of talks recently and talking with other people who are about like training skill sets to like high schoolers and giving them, different ways that AI proof job and learning in VR, XR. We're like, it's not if it comes to your industry, it's in fact of when is it going to come to your industry. It's just spatial learning and spatial networking. It's all, that's our next step is spatial computing, period, I think.
Yeah, we are the input method.
Hmm. So from your experience, what are the biggest gaps and misconceptions right now when it comes to XR in healthcare?
I think that I guess the biggest misconception is that there's more of it. I think there needs to be more of it, but people assume that there's already a ton. If you go talk to the folks over at IVRHA, there's a ton happening in the sector, right? There's a ton, but it's also not the biggest conference that ever has been. Like it could be bigger. You go to ITSEC and it makes IVRHA feel like it never happened. Not to throw shade at them at all, but like ITSEC is a much,
Right.
much, much bigger simulation conference. It's just that one is focused on healthcare and one's focused on defense, right? So there's a huge amount of opportunity that can happen there. I think the other I guess maybe one of the biggest challenges I think is worth drawing on is that metaverse challenge, right? So we're watching
Right.
actively the collapse of siloed metaverses rapidly. Rec Room, I'm sure everyone saw the Rec Room announcement, but they're going out now. We've lost so much stuff. Even Ready Player Me is going away, right? So a lot of the tools that we used to build our metaverses are disappearing, but that also means that we have an opportunity to start creating experiences that are interconnected. But also from a developer perspective, we have so much more in regards to tools to create that like, how fast can we produce a metaverse now? Like, there's just so much opportunity there. But when I create an experience that's going to teach you about the human heart, those assets, that learning content, like we already had mechanisms for sharing courses and sharing content, but we didn't utilize any of that in any of the metaverse applications, right? When I am learning, I have learning objects, I've got content, et cetera, right? There's a standard called SCORM that exists, and that SCORM standardization lets you create learning content. That learning content has modules, has a curriculum, it's got your grades, it's got all the things that go together to make your package. None of the VR experiences that we're used to playing on or learning in generally adhere to that. And SCORM happens within the learning management system. So for people here that are working with that, like I'm not discrediting, like a lot of that content needs to happen in the LMS. But what I mean is a lot more of what we do in XR should probably have been driven by the LMS. And when we standardize our learning content, and we standardize on things like, we've got fantastic groups like the Metaverse Standards Forum and the Chronos group with OpenXR. When we standardize education on top of all of that, and we mix it all together to create a more interoperable educational metaverse, it becomes a lot easier for me to create content that I can hand off to you, right? And perhaps that difference is that like maybe I've helped create a medicine module, right? And I'm not a doctor, so whatever. I'm just a developer. I've worked with a subject matter expert, perhaps, and we've created an experience focused around different types of medication and how you apply them. Well, what is to stop? Like right now, if I was to like hand that off to a partner, and I'll use my friends at Georgian College as an example, and I always do because we always talk about their worlds when I'm on these shows. But if I was to go to like Michelle and say, hey, I've got this module and you guys want to apply it. What if they wanted to create the same thing, but through an indigenized lens, right? So they are the indigenous language program, right? They're teaching people how to speak Ojibwe. They're sharing their culture. It's part of their educational background. And medicine is important to them, but it's different, right? So if they want to do a land-based, like a land-based learning module focused around like doing a medicine walk, perhaps those plans offer the same benefits as some of the medication, but you can't just apply my curriculum to that and my experience to what they're doing. So there needs to be some sort of easier way to share objects, to share curriculum, and allow people to iterate on that within the space to create more, I guess, more interoperability between courses. But that I don't think like the current structure for how we had things set up in the metaverse, which was largely focused around Meta's application of their own metaverse, didn't allow for that from like a pricing perspective. The thing that made the internet successful was the fact that it was open and standard. And you could create a website. And if I went to your website from my computer, it worked. And if you went to my website from your computer, it also worked because we were using standard languages and the browsers worked in a certain way. We need that sort of mentality in the VR space. And I think that's why I'm excited for like the Vive, the Vive frame, or sorry, the Valve Steam frame. The new Valve headset it's an x86 based headset running a Linux distribution. It's treated more like a laptop than a phone. And I think, Rachel, you've heard me complain about this exact thing before. Laurel definitely has. But one of the challenges that we have with headset deployments right now is that everything, and I'm holding a Quest 3 in my hand, which for some reason I'm not using to meet with you. So is there anyone in this meeting that's in a headset right now?
Me.
Other than Rachel?
No.
You're the weird one out. You're the weird one in a VR headset at a VR talk. I'm on my laptop because I came straight from a meeting and rolled right into this. But like the headsets are all running Android. So from the perspective of redeployment and interoperability, yeah, we're all using the same Android phone, but that's kind of changing now. Right? There's the new headsets coming from Google. There's new headsets coming from Samsung, et cetera. They're all running different versions of Android. Right. But, and by the way, Google's working to remove the ability to sideload. So it might be more like an Apple experience in the near future, but just keep that in your back pocket. But because they're all Android phones, it's difficult to deploy from an IT perspective, which made it a non-starter for a lot of companies. They don't want a bunch of phones that are going to lose support in 2 years. Your laptops at least are going to last 5. I think we're kind of stuck with Quest for more years than we had originally expected now. But, you know, the idea was that for a while there was a new Quest, a new Pico, a new whatever every year. How many versions of HTC headsets exist that none of us have ever used before now?
No, I think that's a good realization and a real reality check for sure. I agree.
I still have 32 Oculus Go's on a shelf.
32? Oh my God.
Yeah. I got a massive warehouse of old tech. You guys should come hang out soon and see all my old stuff.
No, I would love to. Just get me into Canada. I'm in the States now, finally. So,
yeah, you told me. That's great.
No, I'm excited. So looking ahead, what do you think of the next 3 to 5 years with the combination of XR and AI? And realistically, not just the hype, but what are you truly expecting to see implemented?
Well, I'll say the controversial thing, and I'm part of the problem, but we'll see a ton of slop. Did you see Google's new model that can create an entire XR experience? I think Laurel posted it on the Educators in VR Facebook group. So if any of you haven't seen it yet, go and follow the Facebook group and you'll see the post. But if you look at my comment, basically I was like, well, that's going to happen. And, you know, we're going to have a lot of slop. And so I predict that there's going to be a huge influx of experiences that aren't quite right. You know what I mean? Like they'll probably look beautiful and they'll work fine, but then like there'll be some weird bugs, but then there also might be like inconsistencies in content, because I'm finding that a lot of people right now have got into the mentality of like offload their thinking to Claude. It's not just about like implementing new code. They're not even thinking about the problem space. They're just trying to go so fast. And unfortunately, that's probably going to be our next year in VR. For the last year, everything I saw pitched for the most part was AI-powered avatars. How many AI-powered avatar startups do we really need? Well, how many people are going to now be offering worlds that are just generated by that XR model until everyone catches on and realizes you can just generate it yourself from Gemini? But the thing is that I think that there's still value in the human-crafted content. So like I'm not anti-AI in any capacity. I spend a significant amount of time trying to find good workflows. I'm a systems and workflow guy. So if there's systems to be created and workflows to be explored, unfortunately, I'm drawn right to it. But like, there will be value in the human crafted content, but people have largely, I think at a high level, especially on the consumer side, kind of lost interest in VR in its current state. And we talk about that every time we do one of these shows, right? There's a studio shutting down, there's layoffs, there's whatever's happening. And it is what it is. But there's still opportunity for this industry. The B2B side isn't as effective as the consumer side because you kind of control the ecosystem in regards to what headsets you're deploying and how you support them and whatever. And it's a longer term engagement because, like I said earlier, you're looking for that like 5-year support window. And so like what you have now is kind of what's happening. But so that this next year, I think we'll see a lot more AI generated slop. But then I think a couple of years from now, it'll start to calm down a little bit, and people will be more interested in what is coming. But what we really need right now is a new headset. We need an exciting headset that is. I'm not going to say consumer exciting because I think like any headset has the potential to be consumer exciting, but we need something to take off that's more like a computer. So you can do longer scale deployments that you're not vendor locked in for a specific store. Stuff along those lines. Otherwise,
we have a question in the audience. When you're ready.
Yeah, we may as well. Otherwise, I'll never stop.
No, so I have 2 questions. First of all, okay, I was just very interested to talk so far, but you mentioned something about Rec Room. What's happening about Rec Room?
Rec Room shut down.
Rec Room is shutting down.
Yeah, they did a statement. I guess I'm breaking the news on XR News, guys. But yeah, Rec Room. And it's interesting because I think Rec Room was one of the best examples, in my opinion, of starting in VR, realizing that they needed to branch out of VR, and then doing it pretty quickly. And I would say nothing negative at Engage because I love Engage. I love you, Chris Manson, wherever you are. But at the same time, there is some visual limitations to these kinds of spaces. And Rec Room did a really, really good job of embracing the technical limitation from like the VR perspective, but also making it like appealing to kids. My kids never really got into it, but I could see what they were trying to do. So it is sad. Yes, it is sad. Yeah, only went in there like 3 times, to be honest. But
do you know when it's happening? Because I'm a big fan of Rec Room myself,
June
and
1st.
I haven't heard this news.
June 1st.
Laurel knew. There you go.
And your second question, Simon?
Wait, my second question. So you know how you mentioned the bus earlier? Was that just a show? Because I swear I've seen like a movie or something about it.
So, sorry, you mentioned the what?
The Magic
the
Bus.
Magical Bus.
Oh, the Magic School is a TV
It was
show.
an American television show.
No, but it was not a movie. I remember. I was just thinking about it there. I think
I'm sure there's like 10 different movies that use the same concept. It's all kind of driven by that, like, the whole story of being shrunken down. Yeah, exactly. But it's like elementary school field trips dialed up to 20.
So Dan, I know you've built a lot of worlds here in Engage. Do any of them have that medical? Have you used or in healthcare?
We've had a couple worlds that we've used in Engage. Specifically, we created like doctor's offices. We've created clinics and stuff along those lines. That's mostly for like nurse training. We've also done experiences that were like more focused around like touring physical locations, like creating like digital twins of hospitals and stuff along those lines. Most of the healthcare stuff that we create though is outside of social XR. So it's less about learning as a group and more about practicing your task. So, you're going to go learn how to perform this like cricothyrotomy. You're going to go learn how to do a needle decompression. And it's just trial and error. Here's your scenario, try this. Here's the things that can go wrong. Here's the things that can't go wrong, etc. Some of those are more complex. So for example, talking about human physiology engines. By the way, the tool that I like to use for that, there's actually 2, but they're the same tool. The ARA has an open source package called BioGears. And BioGears is basically, it's a human physiology engine that runs, but it has an API that you can integrate into. I've integrated that into Unity in the past. It's been great. However, there's a fork of that project called Pulse. Pulse does a lot of the same things. They've got some nuances of what they do differently, but Pulse has a Unity plugin. So you can add a human physiology engine to your application. It doesn't work on iPad, by the way, sorry. They don't have a DLL that runs on Apple hardware. But if you want to run like something on like a PC VR experience, which is where most of my like large scale deployments happen when it comes to like simulations, because you need a lot of compute power for a lot of these things. But you can run it on Android hardware as well. So if you have tablets or I mean, in theory, you could do a Chromebook. I've never tried, but in theory, or on like a Quest or a Pico. And basically what that does is it allows you to, fine, you've got your avatar, you've given it a voice with your AI agents. Well, now you can give it a circulatory system. And you can give it medication and see if it kills it or not. Like it's an interesting package, but the nice thing is it's free to get started with, and I find it to be pretty lightweight when it comes to implementing tech. So that is everyone's like free nugget. Go take a look at Pulse and BioGears, and they give you a fantastic pathway into human physiology engines for your experiences.
No, I think that's great. And another thing that I really enjoy about your work is you're not just using a headset, but you're using like haptic gloves, and you're using all these different kinds of accessories to explore a medical.
Oh, yeah. We create
Yeah.
some of them. I'm holding a lightsaber that I made right now. You actually had a picture of it in the slides at one point. There was a picture of Ashley and I from our VRTO talk where we created the lightsaber. But yeah, there it is right there in the bottom left. I'm holding that lightsaber right now. Anyways, we create like haptic interfaces and stuff along those lines when we're trying to simulate a tool. So whether that's like 3D printed silicones or stuff along those lines to simulate flesh that you want to cut through, which by the way does not really to me feel like cutting through real stuff, which I've had the misfortune of being able to experience. Spend a lot of time scanning cadavers. We create tools and interfaces. We've done everything from aerial work platforms to welding guns to lightsabers to just like straight up interfaces, like full controlled, like the simulated cockpits and stuff along those lines. It's a mix between physical hardware engineering and creating a digital space. And I think that's what like really, well, I mean, my favorite version of all of this was aerial work platform because it was the first we ever did. And that was when the Vibe trackers came out. And I'm very proud of this fact. On the original Vibe tracker webpage, there was a quote from me on how cool they were. And that was because of that project. But we basically created a box, and that box was mapped one-to-one to an aerial lift. All the switches, all the e-stops. We even went out of our way to get the joysticks from the actual control or the actual things, which by the way, were $600 a piece.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you know, we start building with these simulators with like very accurate or real hardware, not like fake stuff. You have to pay vendor prices. It's definitely it's not affordable always. But yeah, like on the healthcare side, like looking at different materials, we at one point created a sleeve for the neck of the cadaver that you could hold, like if you're holding a real scalpel, you could do a cricothyrotomy, but instead of cutting into the real cadaver, you're cutting into an overlay over the cadaver. So you could do a cricothyrotomy on the same cadaver over and over and over again. Otherwise, you got to find a new spot to cut every time. And by the end of it, their neck is like Swiss cheese.
Yeah, to be honest with you, learning about the cadavers in XR VR was one of the first things that really opened my eyes to the benefits of having medical in XR VR. Back in the day, you had one cadaver that was never cut to one doctor, and now that you have one cadaver that's been cut, 5 or 6 different sessions, and then you have like 10 doctors. So it's not the same experience, one doctor, one patient, or one.
Well, not only that, you start looking into like Gaussian, right? So one of the things that was happening during this project is like Nerf and Gaussian splatting started coming out. And so we did, not on all of them, but on some of them, we did a full reconstruction of the human body at different layers, at different levels of dissection. So now within the university, they can go and pull up these 3D holograms of dissected humans at a whole bunch of different layers without having to like find another human to dissect. So they can show all the first year students the inside of the chest of a human that was just dissected versus needing to like book a bunch of lab time, and they could do that with headsets.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, great. Well,
are we ready for field trip? Field trip.
Let's go.
Field trip. Take us, Dan. You have the ability.
Come hang out.
All right, you load us up. Always well. You love field trips.
You know, here, I'll take everyone into the, where are we here? Medical, where's the doctor's office? Let's go to the Georgian College Language in the doctor's office. So this is a
All
language
right.
training experience using the same world. So I'm going to, it's downloading for me. So just,
Okay.
So how long does it usually take for you to make a world like of this nature that we're about to visit?
oh, like just maybe like a few weeks, maybe not like nothing crazy on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any, I'm looking straight at you. So it must just be an
I know.
engagement.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So this is language in the doctor's office, and this is an Ojibwe experience that was created as part of the language worlds for Georgian College. This is the same world that we can use to train nurses or doctors in processes in a clinic. So you could imagine if you were in a First Nations community and you were learning about working at the nursing station, this could be a world that is used for that. The interactive hotspots that you see around are they're going to trigger Ojibwe language. So you can click on them. Audio.
Are they local? So does everyone hear, or just the
local.
person
No,
hears?
only you. So if you click it, only you will hear it. So it's not going to go crazy in here. And what we did is we recorded their elder to speak those words. It'll show you in Ojibwe. It'll also show you in English. And so you can see things like exam table, and there's like some more implements on the table. Here's like cotton balls and gloves and Kleenex boxes. I think this is literally the Kleenex box from my living room. Stuff along those lines. So this is a very small world. It's part of language in the workplace, and we repurpose these assets. So you might have seen in the slideshow that there was chiropractor VR, which is a experience that we created to teach chiropractors that are students about different parts of the spine. We used the exact same exam table and stuff in the background. So a lot of asset reuse, but we try to push Engage to its absolute limit. So I am always accepting feedback, but you'll notice that even the tiles are not all uniform. Some of them are even rotated. There's variety at that level. If you come in, you take a look at like the glove boxes and stuff like that. We try to put a lot of detail into the assets that we create. And so, yeah, this world is a doctor's office, and in it, you can learn how to work as part of a doctor. As a nurse, you can do exams, etc. You can do the conversational training as well, right? Because you can bring a social world in here, and you can do that role play aspect where now you're visiting your doctor and they're going to ask you your questions, etc. Engaged has their AI avatars that you can pull in as well, so you can run those in this space as well. So it's been a fantastic little office that we've used for a lot of different training experiences.
Fascinating. Fascinating. You have another place for us? Because we have a few more minutes left.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Go somewhere cool.
Yeah. And this is so important, especially I love the language thing, because it's so important that we accommodate languages and we understand them and appreciate them, because it's, especially in the medical field, it is so essential that people are understood. I remember there was an episode of the TV show ER where a woman overdosed and died because she didn't speak English, and her pills said to take once a day, and she translated that as once, which means 11 in Spanish. Such a little thing can kill you.
Like quite different, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring you into another language world that I worked on, but mainly just because I want you guys to see the art style. So I'm going to load up the campfire here. So this one was interesting while it's loading here because it uses a lot of 2D assets that we turned into 3D worlds. And the original art for this space was created by artists from their community, and we brought it into 3D. So we literally worked with the Illustrator files, loaded those into our 3D software, and created 3D versions of what you're going to see. Me showing off my art to you
Nice.
Matthew would like this.
This is lovely. Yes.
Matthew.
Yeah, and then so same idea.
This is
There's
wonderful.
hotspots that speak the language to you around the table, but I really like how like things like the moon pictures. I like how the assets appear on the table here. If you go over to the tents, there's assets in the tents. There's also animals on the ridge line of the forest. So if you go find like the bear and stuff, you'll find them out there. But this was all a 2D page in a storybook, and it's one of 5 worlds that we brought together. And the reason I wanted to show you guys this world is this was created with a group that has yet to deploy this yet. So like I can show it to you here, but it's not like publicly available yet. So this is the only time I've brought a group in here.
Oh, good stress tests. Fascinating. Oh, nice use of shadow.
Thank you.
Good shadow. Yeah, wonderful.
You can go right out to the water as well, and you can see there's plants by the shore. There's a little dock. There's and I just love the moon and the reflection of the moon on the water. But when you're out on the dock, you'll see that there's a boat. In other worlds that are attached to this one, you can actually go in that boat. And the way that this starts is you're in the community, and you're going to the store with your grandpa, and once you've got all of your materials, you are in the boat and you're heading here. And then the next world is you're almost here and you're looking at animals. And then you arrive here during the day, but the camp isn't set up yet. And then finally, here we are. The boat is docked. We've arrived.
Nice.
Camp is set up and all that jazz. So it just progresses
Like
through the story.
water.
But
The
if you
water
go
looks
up to the
real.
trees, thanks. Yeah, the water I'm really happy with, but you'll notice that like we did a lot more of like 2D foliage. And even though the forest feels super full from this perspective, because this world you don't spend a lot of time in the tree line, like they're all 2D, right? So when you get right up to them, like yeah, they don't look the most fantastic, but you can have a ton of forest. So it ends up like the trade-off is just like an incredibly dense forest with great parallax between the trees, because we have real depth. They're not just like a 2D asset in the distance. And it lets us use the trees from the actual storybook. So there's a lot of visual tie-in to the stories. So when the students finish reading the book, which is the first 5 pages of their language journey, then they come in here and they can apply that knowledge.
Fantastic.
I like the shadow.
Yeah, really
Very cool.
fascinating. You know, from day one, you have pushed the limits of, immersive technology and spaces, and we so appreciate it. And I have one last question for you, because we're coming to the end of the XR News Show with MedHealth Edition. Rachel's lost her battery, ran out, so this is Laurel stepping in to cover. You've talked about the future. You've talked about the interaction, AI coming in and changing things and stuff. Give us some, with the news of Rec Room and the different changes and things that are happening, give us some last hope.
Oh, I mean, I think that these changes are inspiring people to think about what's next. Even though things like Rec Room and stuff like that are going away, that doesn't mean that the XR industry is changing. We are creating with a medium. This isn't the Quest industry. This isn't the, whatever, as much as it probably was for a while. The tools are shutting down because the phase 1, I was talking with a conference organizer the other day. I don't want to name them just in case I say something problematic. And what we were talking about doing is we have sort of the opportunity right now where there's all of us olds that have been in the space for a long time, that we've been building our companies and we've been building stuff. Well, I mean, Rec Room clearly, they stated it outright. They weren't able to turn it into a sustainable, viable business. I get it. That means that they took out their capital, they got their rate, they raised their round, whatever, but they just never found a way to make people want to pay for everything in the game, to the surprise of, I guess, nobody. And eventually they ran out of money. Okay, we get it. But the thing is that there's new tools that allow us to create now. And that has obviously made investors think, okay, well, maybe we're not going to invest in more products today. But what that means is that there's an opportunity now for the next wave to figure out where everything went wrong. And so what I've been doing locally here in Winnipeg, and what the people I'm talking about have been doing in their communities, is we've sort of started thinking less about the ecosystem at large and thinking more about ecosystem where we are, and trying to inspire the next group to create. And so, for example, out in my warehouse, which is where I run my servers and I do all my prototyping, we do somewhat regular parties here in the Winnipeg area, and they're literally just called warehouse parties. But at those parties, it's like media and entertainment and film and tech and startups and whatever, and we're just making stuff, right? And we're just trying to inspire the next wave to want to make. And here's the news flash to everyone here. Important. We get to go with them. They need us too, right? Like, we've already been through that trial by fire moment. And so, like, that wave one, which has largely resulted in quite a lot when you think about it, like, we probably wouldn't have the advancements in AI if we didn't have the advancements in VR, because we ended up having a lot more efficiency put into our chips and a lot more focus put on the graphics cards. And that really drove NVIDIA for a while to move into the like 20 series cards, right? We needed RTX, we needed all these things. So like, this industry helped drive a lot of what's happening in the AI space. But I think that, like, of all industries, we are using that tech stack the most effectively because it's required to create. And so what we need to do as a group, and I think what is happening, is we collectively are inspiring the next group to create in ways that we didn't expect. And they will ultimately help create that future. And so this is the time to start thinking of new ways to apply that technology, because now you might have the tool that you did not have before to create your own prototype.
Absolutely. And what's so exciting is that right now, so we're part of our audiences right now, Mount Royal University psychology students in Calgary, Canada, are doing a presentation on XR therapies, mental health therapies right now here in Engage. And so we do suggest that everybody who's left here dart over there and catch the last 20-30 minutes of it, because they were given a mandate to work within boundaries using only the Engage tools, and they're pushing the limits to present. We're doing 6 presentations from 2 different classes from Mount Royal University this semester, and they are really doing some amazing work. Today is Safe Steps VR Emotional Support Experience. And so I'm eager to see what they're doing. Yeah, and that's the same thing. We're encouraging classes, teachers, to get out of the way and let the students teach. And that makes such a difference when they're using the tools. And the students, these are bachelor and master students. They are so excited to be in this, and many of them have never touched VR before. And here they're presenting within just a few weeks of the semester, and they're presenting. And that's what we need, is we need to get that enthusiasm going. So I love those positive words. So Dan Blair, thank you so much, as always, for being here. You are amazing. You are beyond a pioneer. You are the first steps person. And we've been friends. We've known each other even longer than we've known that we know each other. So I'm so thrilled always to work with you. And this is an XR News Med Health event with Rachel D., whose battery went dead. As happened, she's getting a new headset later this week. The technical choice. We meet every Wednesday right here in the amazing Engage XR platform. These are news shows are free and open to the public. And next week is our regular XR News, and we'll be talking about the news from Meta. We'll be talking about Rec Room and everything else. We also have an event coming up later in VR Chat today. Also be talking about that. We're having a big social party, so everybody come join us. You can find the video for this on our YouTube channel. More information in educatorsinvr.com, on LinkedIn, Facebook, and all of our other channels. And I want to give a thank you to all of our sponsors. We got to get BSD, your companies in here as sponsors for the XR News, including Reinhardt Foundation, Girls Team Institute, Vertex Form 3D, Cadets Metaverse, Engage XR, Immersive, the iLearn Network, Virtual World Society, Bridge Makers, and all the other organizations that keep us going. Again, Dan, thank you so much, and thank you to Rachel and everyone for being here, and we'll see you all next week here in Engage XR.